On September 8, 2001, I announced to the world that The Amazing Race was the most daring competition ever attempted. 11 two-person teams bound by friendship, love, and family, going on a 35,000-mile race around the world for a $1 million prize. Well, no one could have predicted that 32 seasons and 15 Emmy Awards later, The Amazing Race would become part of the global zeitgeist.
I knew I couldn't go back.
You just put it out there.
She said you've got less than a year to live.
Just dug even
Luck
deeper.
is the residue of design.
Nobody else was doing it, so why couldn't I?
That was the turning point.
Welcome to the BUCKiT podcast with Phil Keoghan. Every week I talk to Mavericks, disruptors, and innovators. People who ditch the excuses, swerve off the predictable road, and epitomize what it means to tick it before you kick it. You don't really know what you're signing up for other than it's this CBS Global Adventure Around the World show that doesn't have a name.
Yeah, and you couldn't really tell your bosses what we were doing at the time as young lawyers at a firm. You kind of, we're taking 6 weeks away from the clients to go run around the world. They wouldn't take too kindly to that.
You could call Rob Frisbee and Brennan Swain the OGs of The Amazing Race. The show's first winners, who boldly lined up with 10 other teams on a cold winter morning 18 years ago in Central Park to hear me say that the world was waiting for them. Since then, more than 350 teams from all walks of life have taken up the challenge, following clues from one country to another as they circumnavigate the world with the hopes of winning that elusive $1 million prize. There's nothing quite like doing something for the first time, so as we celebrate more than 30 seasons of The Amazing Race, I thought it would be fun to sit down with our Season 1 winners who took a chance to do something groundbreaking. So I got you here because this podcast is called BUCKiT with Phil Keoghan. It's all about tick it before you kick it, and you guys were part of a Mavericks season. Mm-hmm. You were part of television history, first ever Amazing Race, 2001. We shot in the cold winter.
Yeah.
We left from New York City, and I mean, it's pretty extraordinary to me that it's now been 18 years since you crossed the finish line and won the first ever Amazing Race.
30 seasons? 31?
32.
32.
We just shot the 32nd season of Amazing Race. And I don't know if any of us thought that we were going to be this deep into Amazing Race, if we were even going to finish season 1. And I guess the reason I wanted to talk to you guys is that you are television mavericks. You guys took a big risk in coming onto a show that nobody even knew about. And I just thought it'd be fun to go back and talk a little bit about the history, what you guys were feeling like when you started out, like Central Park.
Still remember it.
2001. What was going through your mind? You're standing at the starting line. What do you think?
Well, first we were driving around in a bus for 3 hours because they wanted to confuse us as to where we were.
I always wondered, well, were they driving us on that bus because they wanted to confuse us or because you guys weren't ready at the starting line?
That's a good
it
question.
Could have been a combination of both, because I don't think we had any idea about what was going to happen. I've often said that it was a little bit like we let a wild animal out of a cage.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because none of us, you guys didn't know, we didn't really know what was going to happen. And I'm just wondering, A, why did you sign up for this? How did you hear about it? So let's go back to the first time you ever heard about this race around the world.
Yeah.
So the way we found out, living here in Los Angeles, I know a few people in the industry, even though we're attorneys. And I had a friend who had helped cast the first few seasons of Survivor. And she called me up and said, we're doing this new show. It's teams of 2 racing around the world. And I think you and Rob would make a good team. Can you put together a videotape,
right.
VHS, because it was that long ago. I told Rob about it. We both thought, that could be fun, but we didn't get around to making the tape. So I got a call from her the day before the deadline. We were roommates at the time, got home from work, and I said, you know what, let's do this. We probably won't get on the show, but someday we're going to see it on air and think, what if?
Because we're busy. We're like, this is never going to happen, but let's do the tape. Slim chance we'll get on, but at least we do.
Well, were you excited about the idea, at least about what it was?
Well, yeah, that's why when I said, we're going to see the show someday and wish we had done it, definitely. When we found out it was racing around the world, going to different destinations. Of course, it didn't even have a name. I think they called it then the CBS Summer Global Adventure Series.
She had kind of couched it as almost
that
like,
just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. She had kind of couched it more like a scavenger hunt or something like that. So we didn't even know there'd be a lot of travel involved. And for me, that was the biggest thing. I'd never really even traveled in my life. I went straight through high school, straight through college, sports and books, law school, right into work. 12, 14 hours a day as you do when you're young. Never thought about the world outside my little bubble. So this was a pretty big bubble burst.
Yeah, and it was pretty much the same for me. I had been on one surf trip to Indonesia, which to me was about as exotic as it gets. Other than that, I grew up upstate New York. I'd been to Canada, and then living in Southern California, I'd been across the border to Tijuana. So other than that, I hadn't really traveled.
So your two big countries, two big trips, Canada, Mexico.
Canada and Mexico, right.
And
So,
wasn't that one of the running jokes that the Guidos had, is that we've never been out of the country or something like that?
Yeah, they didn't want to team up with us at one point because we weren't well traveled.
Yeah.
And so we definitely, even though like he said, we may have felt like we were doing it as a favor for somebody, at the same time, we thought, well, we keep making the joke, as we both said, we don't think we'll ever get on this show, but if we did, we both were definitely excited to do it.
And then before we know it, we're at the hotel doing the casting and all that stuff. So it happened quick.
So you sign up. You don't really know what you're signing up for other than it's this CBS Global Adventure Around the World show that doesn't have a name. But you think, what the hell?
Yeah.
I mean, and you have to take off a month essentially out of your life.
6 weeks of
Right.
work.
Yeah. And so that's a bold choice in itself, right?
Yeah, and you couldn't really tell your bosses what we were doing at the time as young lawyers at a firm. You kind of, we're taking 6 weeks away from the clients to go run around the world. They wouldn't take too kindly to that.
And that's one of the big differences too. We've talked about this since in the 18 years that we've known each other, is just this whole show was shrouded in mystery and secrecy, and nobody was allowed to talk about where and what and how, none of that stuff, right? And then suddenly you're on this secret mission. You can't tell anybody where you're going, what you're going to do. And the fact is, you didn't really know where you were going to go and what you were going to do.
Yeah, we weren't withholding it. We didn't know. It's like,
and when you say that we went into it without knowing anything, we went to the store trying to figure out what to, obviously we knew we had to carry backpacks, but what are we going to put in those backpacks? And so we contact production, and all they told us was, we won't let you die from the elements. And we didn't even know what that meant. So we're in like some adventure store. And,
REI or whatever it is.
And we're trying to tell the guy without telling him what we're doing. So we told people that we were going on a college trip. It was like a college course where we didn't know what we were going to be doing. We're going to be traveling around the world. We don't know what types of climates we're going to be in, and so we had to prepare for all this different stuff. We ended up with a tent in our backpack.
Yeah, we left like this $500 tent.
Hold on, you brought a tent on Amazing Race?
How were we to know? We didn't know what we were going to be doing. Yeah, that tent is now being used by somebody in, where was it, South Africa? We just dumped it because we realized we never were going to need it.
At Shumba Valley Lodge in South Africa. We realized right away that it was just going to slow us down. We had sleeping bags. We brought quite a bit of food because, of course, that was when Survivor. The big thing on Survivor was they didn't eat much, and they had.
Hold on a second. I had no idea that you guys brought.
We packed
sleeping bag.
high-calorie nuts, energy drinks, and
what are high-calorie nuts, by the way?
Well, that's what my father's influence.
These are nuts that have extra high calories.
Cashews, things.
Brazil nuts. There's
Brazil nuts.
Tons of calories in them. That's what it was.
But it's funny watching the show now because everybody's so streamlined. They've got like one small little backpack, and we were lugging around with like these 50-pound.
They had streamlined backpacks.
That's why the backpacks are so big at the starting line.
Nobody knew what we were doing.
Yeah. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. You guys never told us?
Well, I don't know if we really knew. All we knew is we were going to, protect you from the elements. You weren't going to die from the elements.
What we learned later what that meant was when we got to Alaska. So we didn't know what it meant. So we had thermals and stuff like that with us. But when we got to Alaska, you were part of production. You actually gave us jackets and boots and things like that. So it was like the only thing we got along the trip.
But looking back on it, that was the best part about it. And to the theme of this podcast, it was an adventure. Yeah. I mean, now certainly the kids that go and do it with you guys now, or the adults, whoever it is.
I love how you call them kids.
Well, I feel old. It's 18 years later, Phil.
Yeah.
I
mean, you guys were kids. How old were you? 24, 25?
We were.
I think he was 27. I was 29.
Yeah.
Okay. So
now we're 31 and 33.
Oh, you're so old and mature.
But in terms of adventure, we're so lucky because we're the only group that ever got to have that raw experience.
And at the starting line, I remember thinking, how is this all going to work? And I think as much as everybody might have wanted to think that they knew what was going to happen, they didn't really know what was going to happen. So just take us to that moment, because I remember it so vividly.
The fountain.
Standing there at Bethesda Fountain. looking into the faces of Frank and Margarita and Emily and Nancy and you guys and the Guidos. I believe it was maybe the first reality show, certainly maybe the first network show where we had an openly gay couple.
That's right.
As contestants.
Yeah.
I mean, the show was diverse. I mean, we had quite a bit of diversity standing there at that starting line.
Definitely. Yeah.
And I gave you this long speech. It felt like it went on forever.
Well, that's because you had to give it a few times.
Yeah, we had to do it many times in different shots.
People
and
up on the
angles.
street watching. I think you guys had a helicopter.
And they must have been thinking, what the hell's going on, right?
Yeah.
And the backpacks were lined up at the top of the stairs. And I just want you to take us back to that moment while you're standing there. And again, you've got these tents and sleeping bags and high-calorie nuts in your bag. and
Soon to be ditched.
And you're thinking, what's going through your mind?
As soon as you told us to go, that all hell was going to break loose. And you kind of knew that, but you didn't know what was going to happen. So the time that we stood at that starting line, from the time we got out of the bus to the time you said go, felt like it was probably 3 or 4 hours, when in reality it might have been 45 minutes or something like that. And it was a feeling like none other. It was just unbelievable stress.
Looking back, I wish I could have savored it. I probably didn't even listen to Phil what he was saying. I'm just waiting for that. Get your first clue kind of thing. Hey, what can I say? You know, I listen now. But
do you remember the world is waiting for you?
I remember that. I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember the first episode too. You walking around on the top of the building for the intro and everything like that. But back at that moment, it was complete stress. But like the beginning of a football game for an athlete, it's that adrenaline starts going. And once we ran up the stairs, you're still stressed, but now you're in it. You don't know what you're doing, but it kind of takes over, and you just play the game, go about it like a couple of jocks.
Well, and then speaking of running up to the top of the stairs, we pull our first clue, we open that thing up, and it says get yourselves to South Africa. And that's
doesn't say anything else, just get to South Africa.
We knew it was going to be travel, but when you immediately read South Africa, you're like, wow, this is really happening.
This is not Canada or Mexico.
Yeah. And there's a measly, like, what was it, $80 in it?
Whatever it was. It wasn't
whatever
much.
the stipend for each leg
come
was.
on, you rich lord.
Yeah, but you're not
measly $80.
For the fans, you're not allowed to bring any of your outside money or any into the race. So getting to South Africa on $80 is not easy.
Yeah.
So you get on that plane, your heart's pumping. We fly through the night. That's a long flight. Remember how long that was?
Yeah.
And you get all the way down there, off the plane. We've just come from winter in New York. We arrive in South Africa. There's huge temperature change. Everybody's running crazy, scared, but just trying to get from one place to the other. What's the first thing you remember when you touched down in South Africa?
Yeah, the first thing I remember is it becomes real again because during those breaks, when you're on a plane, when you're on a train, now granted this was the first one, there's nothing you can do. You might ask some other people on the plane if they're from South Africa, what might be there. You try to get a few little clues, but there's not much you can do. So you actually do have a little time to relax. As soon as you touch down, you're like, oh boy, here we go. And all we've done so far is get to the airport and get on a plane. So now you know the tasks are going to start and you don't know what they're going to be. And so those nerves just set back in again and the adrenaline starts pumping.
Yeah, I like the quiet times. The planes, trains, and automobiles were like the only time I could really reflect that, hey, I'm traveling. Here I am. You talk to people. It wasn't always gameplay. You'd look out the window at some of the smaller, lower flights and see the countryside, the falls, stuff like that.
At the very beginning, you don't remember anything. In fact, I remember thinking at the first pit stop, I just saw Victoria Falls. I can't tell you what it looks like. Like I had no mental picture of it because you're just going so fast. You're like, all right, let's get the next clue. We went for the fast forward on that leg. We
smart.
We hiked down this long, down this canyon. We're right by the falls, but I don't remember what it looked like. So it did take a couple legs to not slow down, but as they say, stop and smell the roses. At least I remember, many legs later, we were at the Taj Mahal, another wonder of the world, and we got our clue. We're running out. I actually stopped Rob and I said, "Stop for a minute, turn around, take a mental picture," which takes all of 5 seconds. Okay, let's start running again.
That was the first time in the race
that was
being
at the Taj Mahal was a little bit of a turning point. I think we both looked at each other and realized we better stop and smell the roses to the extent we can throughout the rest of this, and that was about halfway through.
Yeah.
And I remember that pit stop well because you guys were up on a hill there overlooking the Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
Remember, and you guys stopped, and I think you slept in tents that night, didn't you? Up on the hill.
Not our tent.
No, no, not that tent. Another tent, a more of a royal tent.
That was the pit stop. There was a tent there.
But there was a hotel.
The
Hotel Taj.
We stayed in
you stayed in the
horrible
Taj?
hotel.
Yeah, but it was
called the Taj Kima Hotel.
The Taj Kima Hotel.
It was horrible.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of adventures, that was the first time I ever used a bathroom that didn't have a toilet seat. That's the best part. But just to put a nail on it, we stopped and looked at the Taj Mahal, and we're like, we've got to take a little more time the rest of the way here.
But this is quite deep into the race.
That's like 7 legs into the race.
7 legs into the race.
Because it was just all competition until that point, until it was really, I credit you for doing that, saying, you know what, stop, take a look at this.
I remember Songwe Village, end of the first episode, and all of us, we stopped, and the sun was setting. We weren't planning on shooting at night. You guys were later than we thought. Not you guys, but the later teams were.
Yeah.
You guys arrived in the day, but there were other teams, including the first eliminated team, Matt and Nana, arriving in the dark, and all of us kind of looking at each other going, what the hell just happened?
Yes.
What have we done? And are we going to be able to make this?
Yeah.
We got on the first flight to South Africa, right?
Yeah.
Were you guys on that flight, or had you gone earlier?
No, we were on the same flight. I mean, a lot of people fans don't realize that, and it still happens today.
Well, that
a lot of times we're on the same flight as the leading contestants, which puts a lot of pressure on us because we sort of arrive when you do, and we're trying to stay slightly ahead. It was so exciting to be a part of something new and fresh and going into the unknown. It was just as exciting for us as it was for you guys. But if you told me then that we would be having this conversation 18 years later.
And 32 seasons later,
I wouldn't have believed it.
And I hadn't watched it in years until my fiance at the time, and now my wife, wanted to see it. She had never seen it.
Oh, was
so
that
we
right?
sat down and watched
season
season
one.
one.
She
never
wanted
seen
to
the
marry
show.
you before she knew that you were
Exactly.
Wow, okay.
Exactly. So, no. But we watched it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so much fun to watch.
What had ever been as big and bold as that?
You got to take risks.
We weren't going to one location and setting up a production. This was a moving machine where we were operating in the real world. And I often say this to people, it's one thing to go do a show at 69 degrees in the valley in a beautifully cool studio where you have lunch at 12:30 and you knock off at 5:30. This thing was ongoing in all kinds of extreme climates in the real world, where if there was a strike or a plane was canceled or whatever, that affected the show.
Are there seasons that stick out in your mind as more grueling than others for you?
Well, season 3 beat us up more than any other. I think it wasn't until about the 7th night that we actually got to a pillow where we had a real pillow. And then this last season that we just shot, 32, it just knocked all of us out. It was so hard. I don't know. I mean, there's some seasons where you feel like you have a little bit of breathing room, but season 3 and season 32, I took me 6 or 7 nights before and we've only just got back recently, before I actually got some sleep.
I saw the picture of you sitting up with your eye blind thing on, trying to get some sleep. But that looked pretty intense. Think
about how the world has changed, and you guys can speak to this because the show was shrouded with secrecy. You guys were signed. You'd signed when you guys are lawyers, you understand the document you signed. It was almost like someone was going to put some concrete boots on you guys and throw you in the Hudson if you spoke about anything to do with the race. It was like, you can't say where we're going, you can't say what we're doing.
We were so scared.
You guys had the hold of this secret all the way from the beginning of 2001. For 9 months, you're holding on to this. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to how the world has changed. I mean, you're here now. What were you just doing before, sending out some message to the world?
Oh, I was doing my Insta stories.
Your Insta story,
so people can see within seconds what I'm doing live right now. It's crazy.
Imagine if we had that conversation in 2001. In 2018, you're going to be doing an Insta story. An Insta what?
Who? Well, there's a famous moment in this race where we borrow somebody's cell phone. And it was one of those dial-up things that had no functionality other than you hope a call gets through to somebody on it.
There was an innocence in television
100%.
then where you guys, again, you were a part of something that was new and different.
Right.
Survivor had come on, launched, May 31st, 2000. I remember that date very well. My birthday, actually. But there was this innocence. There was a different way of thinking where people didn't understand what a soundbite was. I've got fans who weren't even born when you guys won Amazing Race, who are now going back and watching you guys.
Thank you.
But it's
true. And we have them contact us still to this day.
Is that right?
I will get emails or messages or something, and they'll say, I don't know if I've gotten I have gotten them from people who weren't born, but a lot of times you get them from like, oh, I was like 3 or 4 or 6 or something like that. And I went back and I became a fan at season 15 or 20 or whatever it is. And I went back and watched the old season. You guys were my favorite team on season 1. And it is cool that we still have that impact.
Yeah.
Like you keep saying, 18 years later.
And
that's crazy.
I would bet that the show, to the theme of the podcast, has inspired a lot of people to travel.
Oh, it has immensely.
You know,
I mean, what I love more than anything is I love when fans, particularly like the younger fans who are finding the series, who go back and then they binge watch and they have all this content. They fall in love with Amazing Race from season 1 and then they follow it all the way through the evolution. They grow with us and everything. And then they will send a photograph of them standing at one of our pit stops.
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
In the exact location. Phil, look where I am. I'm standing at the mat. Where are you? You know, I just love that part of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So let's go back to 2001 now so we shoot the show in winter. We leave New York. We go to Songwe Village. We go all around the world. We go to France. We go to Le Beau. We go to Taj Mahal, as you said. You guys come in and then you finish in New York City, so where we all began, but now you're running towards the finish line. The Guidos have been left behind in Alaska.
Right.
They missed the flight. They get caught up back there, and so it's really you guys against a team who's from New York City, who know the subway system, who know the taxi system
was their
in
downfall.
the city.
Yeah, right.
Right. It was their place. It was their race to win at that point.
It was. Basically, we got in a cab from the airport and said, get us here as fast as you can. And as I understand it, Frank started giving elaborate instructions because he was from there. And it turned out that our guy just did what he did to get us to that clue box sooner. And from there, because even if Frank and Margarita had been on the same train, I'm pretty confident we would have won that half-mile foot race or whatever at the end.
It's interesting. It was their race to win because, well, not only were they from New York, they were from Queens, which is where the finish line was. And we ended up, of course, we got on the train first. They got on the next train. So it made for kind of a dramatic finish when they thought they had won and they came in behind us. But I think had they been either a couple minutes faster, us a couple minutes slower, or whatever it was, if we'd ended up on the same train, I think we would have won in a foot race. So in reality, I think once that final flight was taken, I think it was our race to win. But that's reality versus what was the way it actually came.
And
out.
it wouldn't have been as dramatic even if there was a foot race, if they were on the same train. The ending was perfect the way it worked out.
Wasn't it the most unbelievable ending?
Yeah.
And the globe, right? I mean, there's the globe, and we've got the mat, the finish
all
line.
the contestants waiting.
All the contestants waiting. And then that long run that you guys had from way off in the distance. We could barely see you. And then you guys are running towards the mat, and just take us into that moment.
Well, there was, of course, there's always a sliver of doubt. We were running, looking at each other, pretty sure that we had done it, but not entirely sure. You know, maybe Frank and Margaret could pop out on that, standing up there with you already. So there was that sliver of doubt, but I remember really enjoying that run. Mm-hmm. Like, we were pretty sure we had won, and we kind of soaked it up. I don't remember whether we talked much.
One of the reasons we thought we had won is because everybody was cheering. But of course, being season 1, that's why we thought that. Of course, Frank and Margarita thought the same thing because everybody was cheering. So it turns out we actually had a false reason why we thought we were winning, but we actually were winning.
And then I remember we got up there. You guys, there wasn't a lot of time. You hid us from Frank and Margarita because they were going to be running, and you didn't want them to see us up there and have their surprise, you know.
And then you guys, the shots of you guys turning around, like, you know, are they coming?
Where
are they ahead? You weren't 100% sure.
Yeah.
And then you get up on the mat, and then I think I said something like, 35,000 miles. It was the first time I ever...
However many countries, 9 countries... 4 continents, 35,000 miles.
I'm pleased to tell you you've won the $1 million and the Amazing Race, and there you are, the first winners.
Well, speaking of fans contacting us, I still have people tell me that moment of us running to the finish line and even the entire finale, I've had people tell me that is their favorite hour of television ever, and still is to this day. So that shows what an impact it had on people and why the show's still on the air 32 seasons and 18 years later.
Yes.
So you got to keep it a secret for the entire 9 months leading up to our launch. So I remember the launch so well. And we're in New York City, September the 8th, 2001. And I don't know if you remember, but there were billboards of Amazing Race on the front of every single bus.
Yeah.
I can remember. I all around New York City.
There were billboards everywhere. In LA, it was the same thing.
Same thing, right?
Yeah.
And I remember, I think they flew some banners down in LA. But I was living in New York at the time, and I remember the banners on the front of the buses.
Yeah.
And we launch, and Amazing Race goes out to the world, and people are like, wow, because it was just so different and new, and it was like something, people had never seen anything like this before.
Yeah.
And then 3 days later, 9/11. And I think it was on CNN or one of the news feeds, I see a bus, the same buses that I've been seeing driving around New York City. The bus is covered in dust.
Yeah.
And on the front of the bus is a poster that says The Amazing Race.
Oh, man.
And there are people bleeding and who are covered in dust getting on the bus. And I see that poster. And in that moment, I thought, it had all been about Amazing Race, promoting Amazing Race. This is the greatest thing. And it was such an important part of my life. And in an instant, it was like, what does it all mean?
Yeah.
What it suddenly felt like this very trivial thing in my world.
Yep.
I realized, well, what was the significance of it? Now, with reflection, I realized the value of Amazing Race, but in that moment, it just didn't matter, right? It was not relevant. It didn't mean anything. And it was sort of this horrible feeling of, I'm working on this show, and what does that really matter to the world? And I should be going to do something that actually does have some impact. And so my instinct was wanted to go downtown and to get some work gloves on and do something to help, real. That was real. But that really brought it home to me. That made it real. The whole world changed in an instant. And if anything, now looking back, you realize the importance of a show like Amazing Race, because we're a show that has, and you've been a part of this, that has opened people's eyes up to the world. And so to me, it served a great purpose, because it's taken shows like Amazing Race and also just a catastrophic event like that for us to realize, you know what? We have to take more interest in the rest of the world and look out more than just focusing on what's happening here in America.
Right.
We're a part of this world, and we need to look out more. And so I think we've given people, the show has given people a chance to say, hey, you know what? In these countries, they also have something to share. Yes, America is great, but rather than isolating ourselves and say we're the greatest, there's also great things that are happening in other countries.
Yeah. Well, and people need it now more than ever, I think, because you can bring the world to you on your phone instead of getting out and going and see it. So people need to realize that you've come to love travel more than anybody I know.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, the other thing that's great about the travel aspect of race and the adventure, the tasks, or anything that's going on, I think it just shows people to get out there and live, because when something like 9/11 happens, or I remember after the Paris attack at the with the rock show, I was actually I was out snowboarding that weekend when I saw it, and I remember talking to my friend about it, and I thought, what these things hopefully will do to people is let them realize that we've got to get out and we've got to enjoy life, and we've got to do the things that we've been wanting to do. We got to check those things off our bucket list, because if we don't and we get scared by these events, then the terrorists win. And so I think that's a great thing about why Amazing Race kept on after 9/11.
Yeah, Bertram, who's the executive producer of Amazing Race, at that time he said the world had changed from one second to another, and we were doing a show about traveling overseas, about airplanes. And at that point, I thought that the show was over. This is what Bertram said. I didn't think that we had a chance. Thankfully, people saw the long-term value of Amazing Race, and there was much more of a feel-good, celebrate the world type show. Yeah. But then when people realized the value of it, that it was this blue chip show, I think then they were like, wow, this show's really got something.
It's not always just feel good, though. You guys get some good drama on the show. I mean, the casting is good. That's the enjoyable part about watching it. Except for us, the boring guys. It's
still a reality television show. You got to have some controversy, right?
And I want to ask you about some of your viewing parties, because they're quite infamous. You guys are young. You said you were 27, 29, right? So you're young.
At the time, we did live in a pretty badass
Wasn't
apartment.
It a penthouse that you paid $3,000 a week for? Which
no,
not a week. A month.
I'm sorry,
but back
$3,000
then
a month. These guys are living high on the hog, so to speak.
We were, yes.
Pretending that, wow, look at them. They're smoking cigars, and they live in a penthouse that costs $3,000 a month. I wonder if they won. You weren't giving it away at all.
Well, we had that before we even.
is that right?
Yeah. So our lifestyle was pretty much the same.
Well, here's, and I think the reason they became most infamous is because there was an article in Star Magazine about the parties.
Yeah, I think I have the quote.
You do? Okay,
yeah. They're just partying and partying some more, said a source in West LA, where the two live together in a $3,000 a month penthouse. They have dozens of girls in every Wednesday night. They all watch the show, and the noise continues until the wee hours. Rob, especially, is so hot. Apparently, you're so hot.
Back in the day, yeah.
That they have no trouble recruiting people. It's girls only, except for the two of them. Is that true? Was there only girls?
First of all, I can't believe you found that.
Well, my researcher and producing partner.
There actually is some truth to it.
Well, and then it also then it says something about us getting new cars. So here's the truth. So I think a lot of those National Enquirer Star stories, there's like a kernel of truth to them. We did have parties every week to watch the show. There were guys there. It was mainly just friends that came over. And then when it says something about getting new cars, those are the cars that we have been driving for like 3 or 4 years each. Yeah. So we end up getting a call from CBS. That's exactly what they're like. You guys bought new cars? You're not supposed to give away that you won. We didn't do anything other than have some friends over to watch
living
the
our
show.
same life in the same place we had.
29-year-old lawyers who made good money, and now nothing's changed.
Right. And then that article, got us in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, so in those days, we sound like we're old people looking back.
Right.
Back in the old days. But I mean, again, we're talking about the cut through on television. There were just less entertainment choices. You go from being these appealing, good-looking young lawyers in Los Angeles, and suddenly you're thrust into the limelight. And every week, this is building because you're staying in every week, and so you're getting your 15 minutes of fame here.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering how you processed all of that, because even more so than today, people like Richard Hatch, I mean, they suddenly exploded. And were you ready for that? Because you're suddenly in magazines and you're suddenly being talked about and you've got these people running after you.
I think the first couple times we got recognized, it was like, oh my God, this is super cool. And then you kind of get used to it, and enjoy it instead of just be shocked by
it was people always had nothing but good things to say. Luckily, we were a well-liked team on the show.
Race has just such an amazing fan base, and they're so loyal that I think that it just endures over time.
Yeah.
Even though times change, that fan base is going to stay there. The fact that they can interact now more with the show than they could in the early years.
Well, live, I tweet the
live tweet the show,
and I'm getting direct feedback, and we're trending. Amazing Race is trending while the show was on.
Tweeting, feedback, trending. Can you imagine us talking about this?
I know.
18 years
What the hell's a tweet?
No, we wouldn't know what it was.
What the hell's a tweet? We're going to be tweeting about this and social media and all that stuff. I mean, it added a whole other layer to my job, and it's added a layer to other people's jobs. I'm not just having to host Amazing Race now. I'm having to do this other layer. But I have to say, I do love the direct feedback that I have with the fans, because they tell you in real time what they like and what they don't like.
Yeah, I think it's there remains the core of the show is an innocence of throwing people out into a big wide world, and I think that sticks, even though it's a more slick operation now. From hearing you say how quickly you film it and everything like that.
You guys were a part of. You picked something that worked.
Yeah, we sent in our VHS tape for the right show.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, when you look back on The Amazing Race, do you remember more about those moments, or is it? Or do you have to be reminded by watching the show?
I was going to say that the only thing that makes that difficult to answer is I've now watched the show, many times that I can remember things. But I can certainly put that aside. And those first few legs, it is what I don't remember well are the things that were going on during the tasks, or when you're trying to get a cab. It's that I keep talking about the stress and the apprehension and that frantic time. Your brain's just not focused on what's going on around you, so you don't remember those things. And I think Rob will agree with me and all the other contestants as well. The things you remember the most are the downtimes. And like we talked about how fast you guys get through production now. Back then, it took a little longer because we had some delays, and a 12-hour pit stop became 36 hours. We even had one that became 60 hours. And those 60 hours, I think there were 5 teams left at that point. I'll bet you all 5 of those teams.
And do you remember what happened?
Had something to do with visas in China. I remember that.
The spy plane, right?
Again, this is not like on Amazing Race, this is not like, oh, a camera's broken down, let's just go over to the valley and pick up a brand new one.
Right.
Or having to cross some border between here and the valley to get to the studio to go shoot some studio show. No, this is like real world problems where there's suddenly a protest down the Champs-Élysées and around the Arc de Triomphe where we're going to have a pit stop, right? Or planes are canceled, or trains are canceled, or there's really bad weather, or there's political unrest. And we're operating in the real world. So
and every one of those things happened on our season.
That was a real world problem that we had. And I don't know if you remember, there was this whole food poisoning thing, right?
I don't remember.
And that was like first leg or something.
I was on a plane, no toilet. Someone got sick. The only vessel, forget about squatty potty and all the rest of that.
For the moment.
There was no vessel for this poor person to go to the bathroom except for a cooler. Small plane.
I don't think I've heard this story. That's amazing.
Small plane, cooler in the aisle. This person had to just shed all their inhibitions. Squatty potty down onto the cooler. Everything that was in came out. Everything that was in him, everything that was in him came out into the cooler with about 45 minutes left in the flight. Very little air conditioning in the plane. We're in Africa. It's very hot. Needless to say, I mean, you can use your imagination about what kind of flight that was. A lot of people staring out the window pretending what was happening in the aisle wasn't really happening in the aisle. So, it was, some crazy stuff happened. And somehow we kept the machine
I think
rolling.
Kevin's pee actually made the cut on the show, right?
Well, so same thing. So Kevin, because there wasn't a bathroom, he had to take a leak, and he found some water.
In Africa, that small little plane.
And nobody in production would have known, but they show the shot of him getting out of the plane and running, grabbing his stuff, and he has 2 water bottles in his hand. And so
it's not
when
water.
he and I watched there was a 15-minute promo that came out for the upfronts.
And it actually made the cut?
Yeah. It made the cut, and it made the actual episode. If you pause it, you can see him holding 2 bottles of yellow liquid.
I mean, it wasn't identified what it was, but
so somebody thought it was just some kind of electrolyte or something that was going to be drunk.
Brennan's right. I mean, the whole thing overall is kind of a blur, and not just because it's 18 years later, but it was a blur a year later. But distinct moments stand out. That sitting during that pit stop, drinking beer when we had that delay with the rest of the teams that were there. The times all the teams were together, which were rare.
Yeah,
are the times that stick out in my mind.
Yeah,
glad you did it. I mean, are you glad that you were part of that first race? Are you glad you're part of the family?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's changed my life like no other experience.
How has it changed your life? What's happened since race for you guys?
So I mean, we talked about.
Give us a run. A brief overview of how your lives have changed in the last 18 years.
So, I mean, the biggest thing for me is travel. I mean, before race, I still enjoyed, I guess we'll say, adventurous activities like surfing and snowboarding and BMXing, that kind of stuff. But I hadn't traveled much. And bucket list for me, I want to hit 50 countries. I know you've got me crushed, but right now I'm at 39. So when I left on race, I was at like 3. So I'm doing pretty well. So for me, that was one of the biggest life changes.
You've been involved in some charities.
I was a part of a group of other reality stars that got to go on these adventure races where we were raising money for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. It was me, Ethan from Survivor, Burton and Hunter from Survivor, and we got to race in teams of 4 in these events in the States and then over in Europe. But the whole time we were raising money for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. So, and of course, pretty much everything was paid for. So we got these cool adventurous trips, get to hang out with your friends, see these countries you've never been to, and raise money for charity. It was really,
and you're still
really
a
awesome.
Lawyer?
Still a lawyer. Took a couple of years off.
Still living in a penthouse?
No longer in a penthouse. I literally just moved about 3 weeks ago. I'm about 2 miles down the road from you.
Okay.
Don't be shy. It's a beautiful house on the beach.
Yeah, just got a new place.
I'm looking forward to those parties. We're going to have more of those parties.
We know Rob is married, and you?
I am not married, still single. After one of the other cool things after race, we were 2 of people's 50 most eligible bachelors, and 18 years later, I'm still eligible.
You still remain. You're still one of them.
I always thought if you went in that magazine, it was like boom. Suddenly you were.
For me, it was the time off that changed my life. The race, I look back and give it credit for not only being an adventure, but kind of stopping the endless grind that had been my life. I was just a very
endless grind.
Endless grind. I was just, I was raised in a, what had been a military family. You play sports, you study, did it all through high school.
You'd never really taken a time to smell the roses.
No, until I was 27. I'd worked in some way or another, whether it was athletics or intellectually 12 to 14 hours a day,
Right.
you know, and then getting out. And Brennan will tell you this, I'm by nature sort of reserved and a wallflower. Getting out and doing these things that come naturally to him, these charity events and interacting with people, changed me and made me a different person in a better way.
So you're more of an extrovert than you were before?
And I'm still not much of one, but much more than I ever would have been but for the race.
So it's been good for you?
It's been good for me, yeah. It really has been.
And you've also been involved in some charity work?
Yeah, I've done the same charities. Going back to Nuts for Mutts was one of my favorite charities.
Nuts for what?
Nuts for Mutts. I'm a dog lover.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
I didn't know dogs ate nuts. Is that good for a dog?
It means you're nuts for mutts, Phil.
Oh, you mean you're nuts for mutts. You don't give the nuts to
exactly,
the mutts.
Exactly. Our nuts are still in South Africa in more ways than one. But no, it's made me a little more open to the world in terms of traveling instead of just living in my little box, whether it's playing baseball or doing legal work or whatever, where I'm just laser focused. It's made me a better rounded person. Well,
thank goodness you came on Amazing Race as Mavericks, and it's been good for you guys. You haven't ended up in prison or,
Nope.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Imagine if I was interviewing you right now in prison.
Right.
And you were wearing some orange outfits and you said, Phil, this has been the worst thing ever for me.
Yeah. We probably wouldn't be having the interview.
If the parties that you read about, if that was true and that's how it went, maybe that's how we would have ended up.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. And back to the theme again, I think the show, even after all these seasons, at the core just convinces people, go out, see the world. And that's the beauty
That's
of
a
it.
sort of life lesson, I guess, of Amazing Race.
Well, that's what changed my life. Was getting out and seeing the world.
It is, because a lot of people assume that what changed us is being on TV. Now, we talked about that some. That was awesome. It was fun having people recognize you. But really, in my mind, what changed me more was the experience.
Yeah.
If there were no cameras, no money, no fame, take all that away, I would do the Amazing Race again in a heartbeat, just because of the experience.
You're saying to me here on the record that you would come back and do it again.
Oh, hell yeah.
Well, Brennan's been campaigning for 18 years to get back on the show on one of the reunions or something. So, pitch him your idea about a season with all the winners.
Well, I think he's been pitched that before.
And then it gets,
I like that idea, and I a couple of ideas I like. As I also like the idea of the first eliminated to come back.
That's cool.
We lost a lot of great potential with teams.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like Avi and Joe, for instance. I mean, I think they were a great team. But the winners. There's so many different ideas. Who knows whether we're going to keep on going? I mean, we're at 32.
What about you? You're still loving it, right?
I still love it. I love it because it's fresh, and as you know, I was up for Survivor before I was up for Amazing Race, and I've been offered a lot of different shows over the years, but I feel like I really, like this one sort of fitted in with who I am and what I stand for, and the idea of promoting travel, and it's, something that's really important to me. I grew up traveling, and so I just love when I know that the show has inspired people to travel. I love that.
I'll say it's been real impressive to see the brand you've been able to build. Which I know you were doing some things before race, but obviously the real exposure of race is really what got you doing that. And all these years later, you're doing all these amazing things. You're inspiring people.
Well,
you're getting people to go out there and live their lives. That's really cool.
Yeah, and race really fits in with that philosophy. But this BUCKiT philosophy, this ticket before you kick it philosophy, it's that. There's nothing more exciting than to me as I'm getting older is knowing that in some way I might have helped someone travel, get on a plane, be curious about the world. And so, I really appreciate you guys coming in and sharing your stories. And I know we're going to see great things from you guys going down the line. So, I really appreciate it. And I end the podcast asking a couple of questions. I think you know what they are. So I guess I'll put it out to you first, Brennan. Just if you were going to take a road trip across America, or maybe you were going to drive across Australia, you could take 3 companions in the car from any time in history, dead or alive. Who would you take in the car with you?
So I think the first person I would take is my father, who has been a huge inspiration my entire life. As he gets older, I know that our days together are limited. So he'd be the first person that I'd put in there.
And tell us why, because what is it that's special about your dad?
So he was the inspiration for me in kind of having an adventurous mindset. He was a race car driver. He was in a band. He just did a lot of cool things. But he grew up in a small town and didn't really get a chance to get out of that small town as far as living. He always lived in the same place. Certainly, traveled some. But so I would love to take him on a trip. And actually, we did when I moved from New York out here. He came with me. Yeah.
Okay.
The second person I would take actually is my brother. My brother and I over the last couple of years have actually drifted apart a little bit. And I think that taking him on a trip like that, because we used to be much closer, would be something that could bring that bond back together. And I would actually say for the three of us, my father, brother, and myself, that would be a great trip together. So if I go back into history, that's the tough one. And I think for me, what would be really interesting would be to I've been listening to a book recently, and Charles Darwin's name keeps coming up all the time. And he was a big traveler.
He was kind of famous.
He was kind of famous.
Yeah.
And I think it would be cool to maybe go on some kind of voyage with him that would be
maybe
kind of similar
Galapagos,
to,
maybe.
I was going to say, similar to what he's done before. And Galapagos sounds perfect because that's on the bucket list and I've never been. So he'd be the third one I'd throw in there.
That's a good car full. What about you, Rob?
Well, I'll start with the historical theme then. I was going to say probably Einstein. I'm a huge science buff. I mean, I spend 10 to 12 hours a day reviewing commercial leases. So in the spare time that I get, I like to read about science, the things that don't relate to things that at the end of the day aren't going to mean anything. So I'd like to drive across the country with Einstein and show him what's become of the world since he passed. Get some ideas about how he learned what he did and what came to him.
And maybe how we could make it better.
Yeah. And then second honest answer, I want to do a road trip with my wife. We've traveled a little bit, but we've never actually done one of those road trips in a car where you drive across the country, go skiing. We're both busy. She's a professional as well. So to take that time and go do something with her like that, we're still in the honeymoon phase, would be great to do. And then on a more somber note, Jerry.
Yeah.
I had a friend who passed a number of years ago from depression-related reasons, who was my best friend along with Brennan during the time of the race. He was at all those parties. I would like to go back before his death and take him on that road trip and maybe put some joy in his life that would have prevented things that happened.
Wow.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, really good answer.
Yeah.
And speaking of life being precious, last day on Earth, what would you do with your last day on Earth?
I would probably surfing in some tropical location where I can be with a bunch of my friends, have some day drinks, and watch the sun go down and ride off into the sunset.
I'd go outside, no matter where I was, because I spend too much time indoors. And like Brennan said, if you knew you were going to go in nature, not inside a structure. So just get out.
Well, you guys did that. Thanks for coming in and having a chat.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
We had a great time. It's so
It's
great
always great to
reminiscing.
see you.
You guys are a part of television history, the first ever winners of The Amazing Race, Season 1. Thanks for being part of The Amazing Race. And,
all these years later.
Yep.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe there will be a all winners season of
Maybe there'll be
Amazing
an
Race.
all winners season. Maybe we'll be doing another interview like this 10 years from now when you're at about season 52.
Yeah.
Will you take it? That's the question. If you were up against all the other winners, could you beat them all?
So so here's the thing.
This is a short answer, yes.
20-somethings tend to win the race, right? We're in our 40s now, but I think we still would have a great shot, and I would put our money on us, yes.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Excellent. All good, Scott? I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. To see more great interviews, go to philkeoghan.com and subscribe to BUCKiT with Phil Keoghan wherever you get your podcasts. Please consider rating and reviewing us. And follow BUCKiT, that's BUCKiT with an IT, on Instagram and Facebook. Also, follow me on Twitter @Phil Keoghan. See you soon.